Hello everyone and welcome to our online series called Smart Marketing. Here today to talk to you about the C-suite response to some retail metrics in our March 2014 edition. I'm Art Sturm. I'm your one of your anchors in today's program, along with Frank Tiedemann, longtime colleague and friend. Frank's president of Salient Strategy for Healthcare. Frank, good to have you with us today.
It's always great to be with you.
Frank and I go way back. Frank started out as a marketer, moved into the C-suite as a hospital CEO in several sites, and now shares his perspective as both a marketer and a C-suite executive. So what we're going to do today is take a look at some feedback that I recently got from the C-suite through 30 participants at my recent ACHE cluster in Scottsdale. This was a two-day program, about 13 hours of content where we looked at revenue generation. Participants were mostly C-suite executives looking for ways to generate revenue. We've taken the 13 hours of content, boiled it down into a few salient points, and wanted to share those with you to show here's what they saw and what they said about the use of retail metrics in healthcare. So we started out with, just by looking over the course of 2 days, some metrics that retailers have been using, such as direct margin as a leading indicator, how they could make that a predeterminant of profitability, customer acquisition rate, the ratio of new to existing, value of a patient, certainly a concept we've all been struggling with for a long time, but flesh that out a little bit, and then upstream, downstream utilization, a new concept we've developed here to understand how a patient flows through a system. Frank, from your perspective, are these standard metrics in the C-suite toolkit?
Oh, Art, these are not standard at all. In fact, while they're very common in business and industry and service businesses, they're just not common in healthcare.
Well, let's take a look at how the group viewed these over the course of over the 2 days. I asked them at the end of day number 2 to rank order those in terms of what they felt was the most important for their efforts going forward. And it was really kind of interesting. They said the acquisition rate was number 1 on their list, direct margin 2, value of the patient 3, upstream, downstream revenue was 4, and then the lag time, a marketing metric, was last. But Frank, they said the most important metric for them to take a look at these days is their acquisition rate. Care to comment on that?
Well, I think that reflects the historic view of operations, trying to put heads in beds. But, you know, direct margin is really the key to marketing and the key to strategy. So I would have preferred to see the first and second reversed.
Yeah, I think we all would have liked to start with the margin analysis, but since our guest picked acquisition rate, let's take a look at what that content was and see how that played out for them. We found that an ideal acquisition rate certainly is subject to local market conditions, but you want new patients to be roughly 15 to 25% of your annual volume for the enterprise. New is customarily defined as someone that has not been seen in the enterprise in the last 2 years, but again, that's a local variable. You can take it back to 3 years or 4, depending upon the maturity of your market and the dynamics of your business. So using that baseline, we explored how hospitals can apply it to their local situation. And certainly acquisition rates vary greatly across the country. Here's 3 hospitals. 2 of the 3 have ranges of new that seem to be in the favorable range, but one is below 5% in the single digits, and it didn't take too long for the management team there to understand the threats that low acquisition had for their enterprise. But the other metric that we look at is really to drill down to see acquisition rates by product line within the same hospital. So here we have 3 service lines, pretty typical: cardiovascular, ortho, and cancer, where we see the rate of acquisition varies greatly. And the value here is to understand which of the service lines is really driving your new patient acquisition efforts. Frank, is this a view that makes sense to the C-suite?
Oh, I think so, and it's a very important way of penetrating the fallacy of averages, you know, across all product lines. This reveals the importance of your physician network, your contracts, and the profitability of individual products. So I think it's a terribly important one for our audience to look at.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is to benchmark against yourself. We're not finding too many national averages and norms for this sort of thing. So understand what your baseline acquisition rate is, and then drill down to the product lines to understand what's driving your business. So how'd they react to all this? We said at the end, you've had 2 days of content, you've learned a bunch of new stuff, acquisition rates being one of them. What will you do, or what can you do after learning about these metrics? And we pass this along for those of you who are trying to understand what the challenges and opportunities for change are within your organization. So when we said, what will you do differently? They said, well, we're going to focus on new revenue opportunities. We're going to track business models to see how marketing may have impacted volume and revenue. Start using the basics of margin analysis. And institute some acquisition and retention programs. And they also said segment and really try different approaches. Frank, I found this to be really pretty encouraging that the group came in really not using any of these metrics, not understanding their value, but by showing them case studies and other examples, they seem to embrace these approaches. Thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I think it shows they did get the message and they understand what they need to do going forward if they're going to benefit from this new approach.
Yeah, I think, to our audience, really it's saying, hey, I really am open to this, and frankly, the verbatims in the group were, there's a lot of thirst for this sort of thing. But then we said, what barriers might prevent making the change? And the first thing we heard was lack of sophistication from marketing personnel at hospitals. I had some system executives in the room who said the skill sets vary greatly, and we certainly understand that. Competing priorities, organizational systems that don't support these measures, clearly something that runs in the face of this type of change. And universally, we heard access to clean data or any data at all seems to be the #1 barrier. And we realize some organizations are farther along in this. We do know there's a lot of workarounds around it, so this really shouldn't be the death knell of it all. But the last two, I think, were really interesting. Risk avoidance by board members and physicians for the challenges of implementing change. I know, Frank, these are 2 areas of focus for you. What are your comments about board and physician resistance?
Well, I think that in my experience, those are a little overstated. That's more of a concern about bringing more issues or new issues to these 2 groups on the part of operations. I do think that board members who have business experience very readily understand these concepts. So it's a fear that's probably overstated. Physicians need a lot more work and hand-holding to move along on this. But frankly, they're good business people as a rule, and they're open to the idea that the hospital needs to sustain itself. And if you can explain how and why that works, they'll embrace it.
Well, and as we know, physicians make decisions based on data. So if we can provide them with some data sets that have been vetted in other industries and apply them to healthcare, the logic is that they'll be accepted. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think that's really been the history of this, and we don't give physicians enough credit for their ability to take in a lot of data and make sense of it.
Yeah, agreed. So, the final one, I left the last for the best or best for last, money, fear, and financial organization resistance to change. I know we see that everywhere, and I think that's sort of a universal barrier. But I hope the audience takes away the fact that there's some interest and even some enthusiasm in the C-suite to move forward on these kinds of initiatives. So what can you do next to our audience? Well, share some of these concepts with the C-suite team, the board, and physician leaders, and talk to them. Begin a dialogue about how can they improve our performance? Are these really metrics that we should be adopting? And discuss the implications that they might have and either some alternative inventions. I mean, there's always the basic question of, is what we have now good enough? Frank, what else?
Well, I think it's really important to pilot some revenue-building activities with key physicians. That is using the data to select your best alternatives and implement and demonstrate the fact that you can generate revenue and bring in new patients that are valuable not only to the hospital but to your medical staff.
Yeah.
The data has always been the historic bridge with physicians. And then you need to do whatever it takes to get board support for these activities. I really think that we underestimate the board's bandwidth to absorb new programs and ways of doing business. They are business people, most of them, and they have an appreciation for metrics that come from business and industry. So I think the ability to lay that out will really resonate for many board members.
Yeah, and I think the big message here is that our audience should really feel empowered to take these ideas upstream within the organization, that these aren't just marketing metrics, that these are metrics that will really benefit the entire enterprise, right?
Yeah, that's the crucial thing. Marketing is not something on the side. It's something in the center of what we're doing as organizations to be effective in carrying out our mission of care for a community.
Right, right. Well, Frank and I thank you for joining us today. And, oops, if we can help, sorry about the little blackout, here's our contact information. Give us a call. I'm at SRK, Frank's at Salient Solutions. Frank, as always, enjoyed being with you today.
It's a pleasure, Art, as always.
And for our audience, good luck. We'll be back to you with another timely topic soon. Thanks for listening in.